Good morning, everyone. If you're watching us online today on the live stream, we welcome you as well. I'm Steve DeVore. This is the Antioch Christian Church in Decatur, Illinois, and we're grateful for you watching us online today. You're always welcome to join us for live worship on Sunday mornings, and those services are at 9 and also at 10:30. So we welcome you today. We are working our way through the whole Bible. It takes about 4 or 5 years to do that, and we do that in conjunction with the children's department. And so we are now beginning to look at the books of wisdom literature in the Old Testament. And those books are Job and Psalms and Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. So the kids are going to get a great overview. And when I say overview, it's an overview, right? There's a lot of material there, and they're going to cover that in 3 or 4 weeks. So we are going to do the same. Today, I want to talk about Ecclesiastes, one of those peculiar little books in the Old Testament. It's about 12 chapters. It is 12 chapters, and we're going to kind of do an overview of that. I want to read, first of all, from chapter 1. We're going to read the first 14 verses. Then we'll get into the message. So here we go. Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Throughout this book, Solomon states repeatedly that apart from God, everything in life is meaningless. It is an empty pursuit. And ultimately, these things that we do on earth really do not make a difference. He says that there is nothing new under the sun. Now, to illustrate this point, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything's kind of empty and meaningless we do on earth. He asks 2 questions, and the first question is found in the opening verses of the book. And so he declares everything is meaningless, and in verse 3 in chapter 1, we read this a moment ago, this is the first question: what do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? This is one of the great questions in life. What difference will my life make? As I work and labor and strive to achieve things, ultimately, what difference will that make? And the answer is a little bit surprising because he said, not very much. We wouldn't expect that, perhaps. We would think that it would be much more encouraging. But he says, not very much. We can work hard in this life and labor and whatever it is that we accomplish when everything is said and done. Solomon said that in the end, in the final analysis, it doesn't really, all of our effort doesn't really make much of a difference in this life. And that's terrible news, by the way, for most of our contemporary culture. In the world in which we live today, everybody thinks that they make a profound difference. In fact, everybody seems to kind of strut around today like they are all that in a bag of chips, you know. I am the center of the universe. You need to realize that. You need to use my preferred personal pronouns. You need to do whatever floats my boat because I am that important. But the reality is we're not that important. The reality is when you get down the road a little ways, you will be lucky if people even remember that you were here. And that's the truth. We don't like to hear that truth. Solomon said, generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever, and what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again, and there's nothing new under the sun. And whether we like it or not, life is going to go on after we're gone, and not much is going to change. Sometimes we think, nobody can get along without me. Well, yeah, they can. And he gives us 4 illustrations of this. He said in verse 5, the sun's going to rise and set every day. You know, he says in verse 6, the wind's going to blow. It's going to run its course again and again every day. In verse 7, the rivers and the streams, they're going to keep on flowing. They're never going to stop. And then in verse 8, he said there is a perpetual repetition to life, that it wears us out. He said all things are wearisome, more than one can say, and the eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. So life just keeps going on. And in chapter 1, in verse 3, he said, what do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? That's a great question. What difference does my life make? All the things that I work at and everything, when it's all said and done, what difference does it make? And the answer is not very much. And that brings us to another question, question number 2. In verse 10, is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? And the answer is no. You know, when I was in school, and probably we've all experienced this perhaps, that I would learn new things. I was always so excited to come home, tell my dad, you know, this new word that I learned, and then he would tell me, don't use that word again. And tell my dad this new joke. I learned this great joke, and before I could finish it, Dad would crush me by telling me the punchline. Yeah, that's been around, you know, for 100 years. My dad told me that one, you know. In other words, nothing's really new. We think sometimes it's new because it's new to us, but typically things have been around forever. Is there anything that's really new? The answer is no. And Solomon said, what has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything really which you can say, look, this is new? And he said it was already there long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those who are yet to come, they will not be remembered by those who follow them. In other words, in 100 years, people are going to come along and they aren't going to know that we were here. Are you kidding? Come on. No, it's true, isn't it? Solomon said we won't remember what was done before we arrived. And boy, that's true. I learned that, you know, in Antioch history, Antioch Christian Church. It was very interesting. So in 1994, I started preaching in a little church across the street in the fall in 94. And the church had, in 1993, the average attendance was about 90 people. So in 1994, wow, we did great. We finished the year over 100. And in 1995, we finished the year over 120. And in 1996, we were in the middle 140s. And I thought, this is great. The church is like never maybe been this big before. And probably in about 1997 or 8, we had over 200 people in attendance. It was probably Easter Sunday. I was so excited. Charlene McQueen, who had grown up in the church, I think, back in the day. She was our janitor back then. Charlene was cleaning. She'd usually come in on, Monday morning. I'd always talk to Charlene when we both came together. Charlene, we had over 200 people in church. It's awesome. It's the biggest crowd we've ever had before. Charlene said, you're not even close. Oh, boy, my bubble right there, You're not even close. Way back in the day, we had almost 300 people in church. I don't know where they put them to this day. I don't, in that building. But anyway, I thought that just can't be right. So I went back in the archives. I looked. In 1954, they had 295 people in Sunday school. Back then, you would actually have more people in Sunday school than in worship. It's kind of flip-flop now. But 295 people. Charlene was right. You're not even close. And you see, things happen, and we think, I'm all that in a bag of chips. But what we don't know is, no, there's nothing new. You're not nearly as awesome as you think you are. Is there something that we can say this is new? And Solomon said, no, nothing's really new. You just don't realize what happened before you came along. And every generation seems to think that they're the greatest thing, that there is. But the truth is they don't know what was done before them. The generation that follows them, they're not going to know and they're not going to care. And it's a perpetual cycle, isn't it? But the fact is that there really isn't anything new. Now, I realize we could say, well, Solomon didn't have the smartphone. He didn't even have a phone. I don't even know if he had 2 tin cans and a string. If you haven't tried that, kids, go home and try that, right? 2 tin cans of string. It's pretty cool. Anyway, but here's the thing. We have different tools, as time goes on, we have better tools. We build upon that, so we're a long ways from the Stone Age. But in the reality, nothing's really different. We have different tools, but every generation that has ever been from all antiquity all the way forward, everybody's always had art, everybody's always had music, and some form of money or a bartering system. I watched the Flintstones. Even they swap clams. So, jewelry, toys, religion, treasures, tools, wars, jobs, social class, sports, education, greed, gossip, strife, murder, immorality, illness, lust, heroes, villains, victims, inventors, inventions, rich people, poor people, popular people, neglected, despised people. On and on it goes, because when you get right down to it, nothing's really changed. Read the Old Testament sometime. Woo-wee, right? Lust, greed, murder, you name it, every sort of thing you can think of, it's in there. Why? Because we haven't changed. And the fact is, nothing's new under the sun. And here's the thing. When you realize that, however, life can be pretty depressing. You mean I'm not the center of the universe? You mean I'm not really that important? You mean no matter what I might accomplish, that when we get down the road a few years, people aren't going to remember how awesome I was? No, they won't. Please don't go home and be depressed the rest of the day, by the way, about that. Because the good news is coming. But this is what he says, by the way, about realizing our own insignificance. He says this this is verse 14, I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, chasing after the wind. And I said to myself, look, I've increased in wisdom more than anyone who's ruled over Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. I was valedictorian of my class. Now, he was smarter than that, right? And he said in verse 17, then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. So in other words, he played both ends of that. I was wise. I put my nose to the grindstone. I went to the university. I learned all that I could learn. But on the other hand, I also indulged in fun. I had a good time. Madness and folly. I went to, parties and rock concerts and whatever. I had a great time. I went to Yale and Woodstock, right? And here's what he said, but I learned that this too is chasing after the wind. Woodstock, by the way, for you young people, was a ginormous rock concert in 1969. Not in Woodstock, Illinois, by the way, but in New York. Look it up, Google it. You'll be astounded, right, by what you discover. You're not as cool as your great-grandma. I mean, how hurtful is that? Back then they dropped acid, now they dropped antacid, so that's how it went. So anyway, Ecclesiastes 2:11, Solomon is surveying life and all the things that he's done and all of this. And he says in verse 11, after describing, by the way, wine, women, song, wealth, everything, but he says in Ecclesiastes 2:11, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. And so here's the bottom line for us this morning. If nothing really is new under the sun, if there's nothing to be gained from life, if our lives don't make much of a difference on earth, how then should we live? What should we do knowing this? And of course, it's very tempting, just to say, I give up, right? My life's not going to make much difference anyway. What should I do? Well, believe it or not, it's not as bad as we might think. The answer is that life on earth, keep this in mind, without God in it is empty and meaningless. Life on earth for earth's sake is a dead-end street. But when you are living life on earth, but your future isn't on earth, when your future is in heaven, when you're living with God in the picture, then it's a whole different story. It's a whole different perspective, and that's what changes the game. And woven throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, as Solomon is repeatedly saying, meaningless, empty, terrible, horrible, it's no good, it's no use. As he's doing all of that, woven throughout the fabric, though, of contemplating life, is the presence and the importance of God. And when we get to the end of the book, and we're going to read it in a moment, we realize how valuable God is in our lives. But we see hints of this all the way along. In chapter 2, verse 24, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This, too, I see, is from the hand of God. So enjoy life. God wants you to enjoy life. It's a gift from Him. Chapter 3, verse 12 and following, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear Him. Chapter 5, verse 18, this is what I've observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun, during the few days of life that God has given them. This is their lot. Chapter 8, verse 15, I commend the enjoyment of life. I like this verse. Enjoy life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life God has given them under the sun. Last but not least, chapter 12. Here's the last couple of verses of all 12 chapters. This is the end of it. Everything has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Solomon, in his wisdom, tells us to live for God. He tells us to enjoy life as a gift from God and make the most of every day. And that's good advice. Live for God, appreciate what God has given you. But there's one more thing. There's one piece of knowledge. As smart as Solomon was, there was one thing that he did not know. It had not happened yet. And by the way, this was different. As anything new under the sun, there is one thing that was very new. He didn't know about it yet. Nothing is new under the sun to S-U-N, right? Our solar system, this great big ball, the sun out there, and here we are. I forget how many buku miles we are from the sun. Tomorrow we're going to have that eclipse, and it's pretty exciting, Of Cracker Barrel has Eclipse glasses on sale for $249. So don't ruin your eyeballs. They're ISO certified. You know, I've got mine. So come join me in the parking lot about 12:30. We can watch the eclipse, and we can all go ooh and ah together. That's what you do when things like that happen. You go ooh and ah. So we can all do that. But anyway, the sun is up there. Life is going on planet Earth. There's nothing new under that celestial ball or whatever, right? The sun. But guess what? Here's what Solomon didn't know. God sent his son, S-O-N, to change everything, right? Don't you love that? I love that verse, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, that's all of us, and he loved the world in such a way that he gave his only begotten son. Who's that? Jesus Christ. He gave his only begotten son, Jesus Christ. And what did Jesus do? He was tempted in every way that we're tempted, but he did not sin, right? He lived a perfect life. And you know why he did? So with his perfect blood, he could pay the price for our sin. And he did. He died on the cross for us. He shed his blood for us, all according to God's plan. God loved the world in such a way that he gave his only begotten son. Why did he do that? John 3:16 says, so that whosoever believes in him, that's anyone, right? Anyone who believes in him will not perish, but will have everlasting life. New life. I read a moment ago, communion, 2 Corinthians 5:17. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Nothing that happens on planet Earth is really different except what God has done in Jesus Christ. Is anything new? No, it's not. Except that Jesus came and died for us, was buried, and on the third day raised from the grave. No one else has done that in all of history. That's new. New life under the S-O-N, Son, Jesus. And you know what? It's a game changer. It's a game changer. When he is in your life, when you're living for him, it changes everything, because now we're not just living for this lifespan, for the stuff on earth that somebody's going to come and not remember it. We're not just marking our time, and it's not going to make any difference. When we're living for Jesus, we're living for eternity. We're talking about doing something that will last forever. Forever. And it makes a profound difference. I love Revelation 21, and when we get to Revelation 21, we're almost to the end of the story. You know, we're near the end of the whole gospel story, the Bible. And I love, as we get to the end, Revelation chapter 21, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven. Notice how everything here is new, by the way, right? And so nothing's new until we get here with what God's going to do. Coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or mourning, like grieving, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, or crying or pain, because the old order of things has passed away. And then I love verse 5. He who is seated on the throne said, I'm making everything new. Don't you love that? I'm making everything new. And then he went one better and he said, write this down, because these words are trustworthy and true. Here's the good news for Christians. A new day is coming. Even though my life can't make much difference on earth, my life can make a lot of difference in heaven. I can do things for God right now that I am sowing seed for eternity. And as we live for him, it is profoundly different. All these things that people work so hard to achieve, they don't make any difference, do they? Wow, look at my record number of gold medals. Without Jesus, who cares, right? Look at all my money. I've got Money, 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 money. No Jesus? Who cares? And these things that we may not have, if it's eternal, if we're making an eternal difference, it's a game changer. It changes everything when Christ is in it, when God is in it. A new day is coming under the sun, Jesus Christ. And our lives won't make much difference on earth, but they can make a profound difference in heaven. We just need to change our perspective, right? Why be so puny as to live for all these little temporary things that aren't going to matter when you can live for eternity? It's just changing your view. 1 Corinthians 15, I love 1 Corinthians 15. I think I read some of that last week because most of the chapter is about the resurrection. Paul's contending for the resurrection and the power of the resurrection. And around verse 51 or so, behold, I tell you a mystery. We won't all sleep, but we'll be changed. And he talks about the transformation of our bodies and these things. But when we get to the very last verse in that chapter, it's one of my favorite verses. And 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, and I always hear it in King James. I'm bilingual. I can speak King James and NIV, right? Multiple languages. I can speak the RSV, the Revised Steve version. I know all these Bible versions, but I hear King James. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. You're translating right now, right? But anyway, for ye know that in the Lord, your labor is not in vain. I love that verse, right? Stand firm. Don't be moved. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord. Why? Because you know that in the Lord, your work isn't in vain. And Solomon says, vanity, vanity, everything's vanity. It's all meaningless. It's like trying to catch the wind. It doesn't matter what we do in this life. In the end, it's not going to make any difference. But Paul says that in the Lord, it's going to make all the difference in the world. In fact, more difference in this world. It's going to make all the difference in the world yet to come in eternity. That's a game changer, isn't it? 35 or 40 years ago, it's been a long time ago now, there was a popular song for a while on Christian radio. It was pretty popular. You may remember it, you may not remember it, but I've tried to come up with a better way to illustrate this point than using a 40-year-old song, but I just really can't come up with anything any better. Let me read the words. Think about this as we talk about doing things on earth that will touch eternity. I dreamed I went to heaven, and you were there with me. We walked upon the streets of gold beside the crystal sea. We heard the angels singing. Then someone called your name. We turned and saw a young man running, and he was smiling as he came. And he said, friend, you may not know me now. And then he said, but wait, you used to teach my Sunday school when I was only 8. And every week you would say a prayer before the class would start. And one day when you said that prayer, I asked Jesus in my heart, thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad you gave. Then another man stood before you and said, remember the time a missionary came to your church and his pictures made you cry. You didn't have much money, but you gave it anyway. Jesus took the gift you gave, and that's why I'm here today. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I'm so glad you gave. One by one, they came far as the eye could see, each life somehow touched by your generosity. Little things that you had done, sacrifices made, unnoticed on the earth, in heaven now proclaimed. And I know up in heaven you're not supposed to cry, but I am almost sure that there were tears in your eyes as Jesus took your hand and you stood before the Lord. He said, my child, look around you. Great is your reward. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad you gave. On earth, nothing's new under the sun, the S-U-N, nothing. Well, we're having an eclipse tomorrow. Isn't that new? No, We just had one a few years ago. I stood in, I was in Wisconsin, my son and I stood in the parking lot. I think it was, I don't know, there's Walmart and Piggly Wiggly and Harbor Freight all stuck together there. We stood in the parking lot and kind of, well, you can't look at the sun. Remember that tomorrow, by the way. Don't do that. But we looked in the sky. It got all wild and weird looking. It's the eclipse. Wow. I remember when I was in grade school, the eclipse is coming. We made these boxes, poked a little pinhole thing in there, and you stand and look in there, and maybe you put your head in it if it's a big box, and you see that little shadow. Nothing's new under the sun. But the day is coming under the Son, Jesus. And God said, I make everything new. New. So let's think about that. Our lives won't make much difference on earth, but they can make all the difference in the world in heaven. In heaven. And I want to end today with these words of Jesus. This is the end of the Sermon on the Mount, by the way. And he said it so well. Matthew 6:19 and following. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.